Ladies and gentlemen, it's another installation of Indie Comic Secrets. We got a special guest, Max Hoven, one of the best-selling indie comic book creators known to man. We're going to be talking about his comic books. We're going to be talking about everything, ladies and gentlemen. My brother Max, how you feeling, man?
I'm doing good. Thanks for bringing me on, man.
Yes, sir. Like we discussed in the back, I saw you drop a lot of gems about the indie business. And when I was listening, I was like, I never heard this stuff before. So I felt like it was important, man, to get you on the indie comic video and just really just break down a lot of things that people might or may not know.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I
So
this is the stuff I love, so I'll get into whatever detail you want.
yes, sir. So this is what we're gonna do. This is how we always start things off. Take us back to the beginning of Max. Take us in the beginning of your love for comic books. How did you get into this world? Where did all this start from?
Yeah, if I go really back to the core of when did I become me as a creator or what you might consider an artist, even though I can't physically draw anything, but it was around 11 years old is whenever I started to really, like probably all kids, you start to really think about what do I want to do when I grow up. And I started writing little movies and making movies at that time. And so comic books as like becoming a comic book creator had not jumped in at that point, even though comic books were a part of my life at that time. And so was I also was a bit sheltered. I'm from St. Louis. I'm not sure where you're based, but my family was kind of like, don't they limited my TV time in a sense, and then they gave
Okay.
me unlimited access to libraries. So
You got smart parents.
yeah,
Cause I'm sorry, man. Back in the day, the parents was right. TV rots your brain, man.
they were right. Now all the things people are talking about in kind of the mainstream of schools and the government are indoctrinating your kids and the TVs and corporations are rotting their brains and like they saw that a long time ago in the early 90s and were basically just like refrain from all this stuff, but they gave me unlimited access to anything in the library, including rated R movies. And the library also didn't see me as a kid as like the librarians at the time just didn't even think of it. It was just like you rented your books, you rented your movies, or they didn't call it renting. They call it whatever. You check them out or whatever.
You check
And
them out, yeah.
and so they would give me everything from graphic novels that were very graphic to DVDs and VHSs back in the day that were R-rated movies.
Hey,
So
that's kind of crazy you say that, not to cut you off, because
no, you're good.
now hearing you talking, I can remember like my love for comics and books, period, came from my mom. Because I can remember during the summertime, she would literally drop me off at the library.
Yeah, my parents too. Yeah, and all day. Like they would
All
just be like,
day.
they were just like, all right, I'll see you when I'm done with work or whatever. I'd eat lunch there. There was like an ice cream parlor down the walking distance from the library, and I'd just like go there and get something to eat, like a soda and a snack or something, and then
Did
go
your
back
did
to the
your
library.
library have like magic shows and like events there too?
Yeah, they did. My library
Okay.
was kind of a baller library to where it was separated to where there was a kids library in one building and then an adult library in the other. And the kids library had events and stuff all the time. And it was like, I'm not sure if I remember magic shows, but for sure puppet shows and for sure like they had like speakers and stuff like that. They had a book club that I was involved in. My parents also had me a part of whatever like the kind of little clubs they had going on. And I remember they had a group that was actually how I got into graphic novels in a different way than comic books, because that club differentiated them. And they were basically like, I remember we read like The Road to Perdition, which is a black and white graphic novel. I don't think it was ever released as a comic series. I think it was released all as like one trade or book or whatever. And I remember that they distinguished that as like this is a higher form of storytelling as opposed to the floppy comic books. And at that time, this was early 2000s, late 90s. That in my area, you weren't getting comic shops at like newsstands on the streets like you would be like if you're in the city. You would get them at like gas stations, or the people that bought them were, I remember, like kind of the more oddball convenience stores that
Max,
sold cigars and stuff.
Max, I know you're not lying because I can remember my dad. My dad bought me my first comic book ever when I was 7 years old. And I can remember the comic book was on the spinner rack at a gas station.
Yeah, exactly.
And the comic book that I got when I was 7 years old was Jim Lee X-Men #1. And the only reason why I got that comic book is because I remember seeing the X-Men on the Fox cartoon. So that's funny you said that because you're right. Comic books were at the most odd places before the
Yeah,
comic book shops.
yeah. And now it's like it's its own thing in the same
Yeah.
sense that if you anything that was, I want to say, like even like Pokemon cards and stuff, it was like there was a whole like industry that was, now
Yes,
it's
it
like
was.
cards and games, but this was
Yeah.
like they didn't have them as shops on their own. It was like you went to these kind of more like bubblegum shops. I remember like kind of just like an everything mix max like variety store. Like there's some like where I was at the time, you would have just like a store that just was like your corner market. They didn't sell anything except for like candy, chips, and nowadays it's more like they're at gas stations and they might sell cigarettes and like cigarellos and stuff. But for a while, it was just like you might get cereal, and then those places also sold comic books. And yeah, they were like either on a rack and it was so. And I remember like my parents every once in a while they would be like, "We're gonna get those there," and my uh, library, I don't think had a large collection of comic books. They had magazines, they had graphic novels, and I just, for some reason, it was never like a part of my daily routine to get the comic books. That wasn't until I was older that I started to actually try to collect them and read through like a full thing. When I say older, I mean like teenager, as opposed to like, but whenever I was really like, this is what I want to do with my life, back to the where we originally started, it was like around 11 years old. It was like, I want to be a filmmaker, and I specifically want to be the screenwriter. And so I started getting really into basically who were famous screenwriters, and and reading about like people that basically went and made movies all on their own, where they wrote the script and did the whole thing. And there's the classic famous stories of Sylvester Stallone wrote Rocky, and Robert Rodriguez wrote El Mariachi and made that on his own. And so, and at the time at the library, they had biographies on, or not just biographies, but a whole section that was just for filmmaking. And I mean, I read through that whole, anything that was on or new that came about. And at the time there was magazines that came out that was like, filmmakers digest kind of things, and they would have stories and then like sell new stuff. And I knew right away that I was like not into the technicals of cameras. And so like as you get older and to cut to like school and things like that, school then like sort of just like any profession you do, whether you want to be a doctor or even just eventually I just studied business management. But before that, they were trying to narrow me down to be like, what part of filmmaking do you want to be? Do you want to be a producer, a writer? Do you want to be or do you want to basically learn how to edit and use cameras? And what they teach you in school is basically just that part, the technicals. And all that stuff changes every year. You get new books of new software. At the time, whenever I was going to school, you were learning how to use Adobe Photoshop. I want to say literally 2.0. It was,
Yeah.
and Adobe Premiere and things now that people don't even use. Like now Sony Vegas was like the new thing back in the day, and of course there's Final Cut Pro and stuff. Not to get too in the weeds on the filmmaking stuff of this, but point being is like,
we're gonna get there though. We're gonna get there.
to jump to it, it was kind of like in the middle of that, I had a connection in one connection in film. You know, they always say it's like networking who you know, and that was a producer that was basically told me as a teenager, whenever I was about in the middle of college, that you know you should just write things and don't worry about anything else. You'll figure it out along the way. What really matters is you have to just get good at something and live a life that's interesting. And I sort of took that to heart and was kind of like, I mean, at the very moment that I like got that discussion, I was kind of heartbroken in a sense that it was like, I thought you were just gonna like give me a job, you know, like I figured, you know, if you're gonna help me out, but instead their help was like a serious good advice. That's basically just like, you're not very good at this. Your dream of being a screenwriter is long away. Like you have to write a lot.
That's funny you said that. Not to cut you off, but that's funny you said that because on one of the shows I had a Hollywood producer on there, and he said the same thing. He thought he was going to have his screenplay, go right to Hollywood, go talk to producers, and boom, it was just going to be perfect. He said, oh,
Yeah.
he had his heart broken as well. You know?
Yeah. I think everybody has to have that moment to where, because you have to have the, like, to do what we do of being creators in any form, whether you're a musician, a physical artist, or whatever. You have something inside you that's like, I want to do this, and then you do aspire to certain things, and at some point you have to hit a wall that's like, oh, like the person I aspire to is literally the best in the world. Like and there's a reason we know their name. And it's not because they got lucky. It's not because they took some template path, you know. And I think a lot of us hit that in college, where whenever you're in school, you think life is about, I go to school, I do my routine, I get good grades, or even if you don't do that, it's like I graduate, then I go to this college, and then I get a degree in whatever I want to do. And whenever you're a creator, getting a degree in whatever you want to do, you quickly learn that it's like, oh, that does not mean you'll be able to do what you want to do. Like, we can teach you the step-by-step mechanisms of how to make a movie, but they're not going to be able to show you how to become a filmmaker. Like, they don't know, they don't have that answer. If they had those answers, the teachers there would be doing that. It's the same as people like me on YouTube, to where it's like, if I had all the answers, I probably wouldn't be on YouTube as much. Like, it's like I'd be just out there like any other super professional, where it's like their life is just creating their art, and their art works. So they don't have to go through a lot of the other steps the rest of us do. Which, if I jump to like where it comes to like what I'm doing now, is whenever I, through a series of events, it was like I went into a career that was unrelated to filmmaking eventually. And I traveled the world, and I did a bunch of cool stuff. And I ended up working in hotels, and I worked at ski resorts, and I did a lot of odd jobs until eventually I kind of landed in what you might call hospitality leadership or management, which is like what I still do to this day. But at the same time, I was always writing, and I was always like doing this hobby of writing movies, writing comic books, working with artists, working with other filmmakers, becoming a part of communities of both comic books and filmmaking, and also music. And I also was like in bands, and a lot of us creators, we sort of do all of it. And even though you're not necessarily, I'm not good at any of it, but it's like I'm good enough to where I could figure things out. And but point being is, in each of those things that I was doing, everybody has this point to where you finish an album, or you finish a movie, or you finish a comic book, and you're basically like, I did it. Like, everything I've ever been trying to do is just make this thing. And you try to make it as good as possible, literally get all the same cameras that the professionals use. You record with the same equipment. You pay to have something professionally recorded, done all this stuff. And you finally have this thing, and you're like, Now, how do I get it on Netflix? Now, how do I get it on the radio? Now, how do I get my book into stores or into shops? Do I call like an agent? Like, what do I do next? And for some reason, like that, we think that like you've hit the end when you finish the thing,
Yeah.
and then a lot of us just drop off because you're now like you start to realize that every next step is basically gatekeepers.
That's
And
interesting. Hold on, because you dropping a lot of jewels at once,
sorry,
man.
man.
No. Don't apologize for nothing because you go in the right direction. I just want to slow it down for the people.
Yeah, yeah,
That's very interesting you say that because with all the people that I've interviewed, they all say the same thing. When they get to that point, when they birth their baby, as to say, as
yes,
far as comic book or any type of project, it seemed like they hit that ceiling. They hit that ceiling.
yeah,
And then I start, because like you said, everybody dreams is, I want this to be a movie. I want this to be an animation. But then, like you said, it's that ceiling. And then people, when they hit that ceiling, they'll start thinking, well, I'll just do it for me. I'll just be an indie creator. I won't be a Hollywood. So speak on that for a little bit.
yeah. So that is I was just like everybody else, and I hit like that limit. But for me, the first thing where I hit that moment, I was fairly, you could say, young, or I want to say I was 21 or 22. This was like 2010 or so. I'm out of high school. My dream is to do all this stuff. I'm kind of let down by the one person I know in the industry, and even them, like in hindsight, it's like they weren't like the one person that can like do anything for you. Like you realize once you get into this that it's not like a job. It's like if you want to get a job in, let's just say, banking, there are banks that you work for. Whenever you want to get a job in movies, there's only 6 studios, and they may have a lot of employees, but like no one just work. No filmmaker just works for one company. There's like there might be even people like James Gunn or something that does a whole lot with one certain company. Like that's not on the level they work at. They don't get a paycheck from a company to work for them hourly or even salary. You're working on a project by project basis, and it's based upon jobs that you either find yourself or that someone finds for you. And so you're kind of always in limbo. So there's no one person in the industry, whether it's music, movies, or books or publishing, that is like the golden ticket to they're like, I got you a job at Penguin Random House. That doesn't matter to someone like me because it's like, I don't need a job at Penguin. I'm writing books. I'm not the guy editing them. I'm not the guy doing the layout. That's a different field, like that's still. And so what happens is there are people that we do half and half, or most of the people that are like in film, music, any creative field, let's just call it broadly entertainment. You might get a day job in entertainment where you're getting a paycheck from one of those companies like that. Even it could be like Warner Brothers. You could be working at Warner Brothers as a production assistant on the week, whatever it is for certain projects, getting a paycheck there. But they're not the person that's going to read your screenplay. They're not the person that's going to buy your book. There's a bunch of different facets involved. Now, I was young. The first thing I tried to do is I was making music with my friends, and I was recording music with my friends, and I was basically trying to become a music producer. And I learned super quickly a guy. There's actually where I'm at in St. Louis, some well-known local rappers and things like Nelly is probably the most famous. Never was
Yeah,
a
but
part of
when
his
I
crew
think
or
of
anything like that.
St. Louis, the only rappers that I might know is a rapper named Chingy and a rapper named Nelly.
There's Nelly, there's Chingy, there's
Yeah.
other ones. There's
Okay.
Jaquan, there's
Oh yeah, Jaquan. But Jaquan
and
was kind of like a one-hit wonder, though.
yeah, it was, but
Yeah.
this is what you learn. This is what you learn is that in the broad scheme of what people think of as one-hit wonders or even somebody they've never really heard of, there is like a has-been and indie people end up in the same group because
Wow.
they end up like someone like that is a what you might call a local musician, or now we call them SoundCloud rappers and things like that, where they're making music and they're performing locally. Well, if there's a famous musician that had a one-hit wonder, well, they've gone through the gambit. Like they've written the contracts. There's St. Louis is south of Chicago, and Chicago has their own like industry, and there's people that have been like involved in both communities because it's just like comics to where once you're in, let's just say the rapper community or indie music community in St. Louis, well, you tour and you do shows, and you run into people that also tour and do shows in Chicago, or you might tour and do shows with somebody that is 5 hours west or east, and you get a part of like the Kansas City crew. And in Kansas City, there was I want to say not Twista. There's
Now,
quite a few
now
other.
Twister was Chicago too, I believe.
Yeah, he might be. He was somehow involved in this, but there's a lot of them. Like once you start to realize, and they have their own underground base. Like a lot of the rappers built their people show by show and
See, that's
selling
like
album
Texas.
to album.
That's like Texas. Texas, for a while before a lot of the rappers became mainstream, it was like a whole underground thing where they was making millions just underground.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so what I learned from a few of these communities and like trying to make music and trying to like because when you're working with people, they're like, I know so and so, and maybe they can get me like a meeting with some guy that it works for some record label or something. It's just like anything where like you think the path is I need to get it to somebody that's already in the game, which is sort of true. And this is like what I learned. It's like everyone that you watch that sort of made it is they collaborated with somebody that already was credible. So if you're a rapper, like there's a rapper in my area in East St. Louis, his name was Raw Reese. And Raw Reese had like a local hit where he literally sold CDs out of his car and things like that. And he got it onto a radio station that played local people and he played local shows, but he partnered and did a song with Twista. And that song then became a known thing. And now he was suddenly credible because he was a rapper featured in a song with a credible rapper. And then that allowed him to get other gigs and shows and like be partnered with other things. And so I had a few mentors that sort of were showing me like, hey, this is like the way this works is like he showed me like there's people that make beats and sell beats, there's people that buy beats, and I started to learn like literally the business of how people sell music. And that was whenever I realized like, oh no, this is actually really difficult and almost like no chance of actually working or not really no chance, but just when you're like 20 years old and your dream is to basically like be somewhere involved in like, if it's not me or my friend group is basically like makes it big as either, some kind of artist, and you're working with people that they have the same dream. And every day you're like recording music, like everyone around you is just like in the movies of like their early career where like everyone thinks it's going to work. And everyone is sort of relying on somebody to like make it all work. But, so it would be like, I have a partner who is in the game and they know somebody and they say, I'll get back to you. Like, this sounds good. Re-record this and you might have something. Well, now you tell that to all your friends and they're like, Max has it in the bag. Like, we're about to get this record or this thing. And that's where I said, like, you hit the point to where like we're making mixtapes and they sound really good and they get them professionally made. And then there's gatekeepers involved, and a lot of them, they started to break down to me. They're like, oh yeah, like, dude, you're like, it's never just like a one hit like thing that becomes something. And that's where like it's never the illusion is that you make a viral hit and then somebody solves all your problems.
Let me ask you a question though. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Man, you cooking right now. Oh,
I haven't even got to comic yet. Sorry.
That's what we're about to get to, because you keep saying the gatekeepers. I noticed you keep saying that. So
Yeah,
in
yeah.
this comic book world, like let's just say, let's take for instance, this guy is really blowing up. The Invincible guy, what's his name? Kirkman.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
A lot of people want that dream of, I want to be like Kirkman, where my comic book blows up and it can become a TV series. My comic book can turn into an animation like Invincible. But
Hmm.
what do Kirkman have that we don't have? Is he a gatekeeper, or he amongst the gatekeepers? What is your
So
thoughts on that?
so like him specifically, you could argue he's a gatekeeper, but I would say he's not in that camp of what I'm referring to. When I refer to a gatekeeper, I don't mean it in a negative sense, like I'm the gatekeeper and like I judge you or whatever. Like it's just the blanket term for what we refer to as, or what I mean is basically producers, editors at book companies. So like Robert Kirkman is an editor, but if you watch his story of like how he broke in, he had to break through and prove himself to gatekeepers at the
That's
time as
true.
well.
That's true, because I
So,
know I got some old comic books, and once I started learning about art and learning about writing, all those old comic books that I forgot about, they got Kirkman name on there, and I'm talking
mhm.
about these are comic books from the late '90s.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
he's been in you learn that the real people that like made it and what you might call true phenomenon to where what they've done has broken records and then became multiple mediums. Robert Kirkman is a perfect example of somebody that once they broke through, every single thing they do now is not every single thing, but virtually what they had breakthrough is now it's no longer a diminishing asset. It's like everything grows with it. He's now the executive producer of it turned, The Walking Dead turns into a show. He's now the an executive at the company at the publisher that once found him. He's now an executive there. So he's the decision maker at a publisher that he was once just barely a part of. He's also, every IP he owns, he is getting royalty checks not just as a writer, but he's like the executive producer, so he's getting royalty checks on all the other shows. If other people write his IP, he's getting paid. Like everything he has, everything he touches, everywhere he goes, he gets paid to be there because you've reached escape velocity. Like there's a level that you reach once you've broken a certain barrier to where you're no longer making decisions based upon what do you think someone else thinks in a way. Like basically, what you're doing has more value just you being involved in it, to where you're the one that's getting paid for everything you do, as opposed to trying to pay other people to help you create something. Essentially, everybody is just paying you to create their vision as opposed to the other way around.
but would you say this though? Okay, like you said, everything Kirkman touched now is gold. I even got Battle Beast, the spinoff series of Invincible.
Hmm.
I got that based on me liking the Invincible animation and the comics. But would you say Kirkman stepped through that gate? Like I understand what you mean by gatekeeping.
Yeah,
Gatekeeping is
yeah,
somebody who open that door and potentially let you in or make you stay out. So
yeah.
do you think when you step through that door, you step through that gate like Kirkman, everything you touch turn into gold?
Yeah, and to back up a little bit, this is a perfect way to outline the difference between the business of art and the actual storytelling and artistic aspect to art. So just because you've made it and even reached like the Kirkman status, that doesn't mean everything he touches turns to gold from a reader's point of view. What it means is everyone that would normally be a gatekeeper in this space, they will like they are underneath you in a sense that the gatekeeper, you're not trying to get past the gate to let them be a publisher or like let them publish your stuff. Like before you cross through that barrier, the gatekeepers are judging you in a sense, and they're judging what you do. Will it make money? I don't know. When you cross through the gate and you're on the other side, now even the gatekeepers that are judging other people, they are actually now like, I am choosing which gatekeeper I want to work with. If I'm a filmmaker, it's like, do I want Sony to produce my movie, or or like, you're all of a sudden the people that are normally making decisions of what they, let's make it very simple. A publisher and a distributor, they are who gets your book on the shelves. And if that's the main way people are reading things, is on the shelves and in the shops, the gatekeeper in this sense is the publisher and the distributor, because they're the ones that give you the ability to put things on the shelves at scale, meaning in thousands of shops, as opposed to just like a few that you call personally.
Okay. That's one of my questions I have for you, for the Indie Comic Secrets. Okay, let's take it to comics.
Yeah.
Your images, Image Comics, Dynamite, Boom, Dark Horse, IDWs.
Yeah.
If I get with them, let's just say Liquid Quill, or my comic book is called Ninja Blast. If Ninja Blast and Liquid Quill get with one of these, are these companies gatekeepers?
In a sense, yes. So
Okay.
that is, to put it into the simpler model, that's how it is. So if we look at it as a form of who is actually buying the books, okay?
Yeah.
If you think about that,
I never thought about that.
at the very end, you think, well, it's the readers, right? Well, it's not. If in the direct market, as we call it, like in the physical comic shops, because I don't know the exact numbers. Let's just say 60% of physical comics, if not 80%, are probably bought through comic shops. The comic shops are local stores that are dedicated to selling comic books, graphic novels, and cards, or let's just say, keep it simple, and it's just comics. But those are what we call the comic shops, and there's about 2,000 just in the United States alone. Many of the main cities have over 20 shops. Like, there's over 20 shops just in the St. Louis area. You expand it a bit greater, there's even more. Now, okay, so those shops, they buy books not from individual creators. They buy them from a catalog from a distributor. That distributor for a long time was Diamond. Still, it exists today, even though they're bankrupt. But there's other distributors as well now. The most popular ones are Lunar and Penguin. And basically, if a comic shop wants to buy comic books in bulk, meaning wholesale, so they're going to buy 10, the comic shops will buy less than 10, but let's just say like they buy books 10 at a time. Okay. They actually order through like a platform that we call a catalog, or the previews catalog, which is how almost like, so basically those distributors have a catalog of all the comic books they have for sale. So the distributor is actually, they buy books from that catalog. Essentially, like, they create that catalog because the distributor buys books from publishers. Now, a publisher, what makes them a bigger deal is which distributor they're partnered with. If they are partnered with Penguin Random House, literally the biggest publisher in the world and distributor in the world, who publishes not just comics, but also books, novels, graphic novels, picture books, everything you can think of. Every major book you can think of throughout all of like history has been one of like the main like three. It's been Simon & Schuster, Penguin Random House, and just like TV companies, these big companies buy each other all the time. That's why Disney is now owned by Capcom or whatever. It's the same in publishing. It's like these same big companies are buying up the smaller ones, and as the industry changes. So right now, the big distributors are also publishers, but to make it simple, it's like for comics, there's Diamond, Lunar, and Penguin Random House. Those are the distributors, and those distributors are basically, they're the ones that actually order your comics, but they're not buying them based upon anything other than who in that catalog pre-orders or orders books. So what
Okay,
they
so hold
do,
on, because you might be going too fast for the crowd.
okay.
So who do you think is bigger? Do you think like those indie companies I mentioned, your
Yeah.
images, your dark horses, whatever? Who do you think is bigger? The comic book company or the distributor? Like your Diamonds, your Lunar,
Yeah.
or do they need each other?
So what matters is the publisher. So
Okay.
in comics, and I've done these numbers. They may have changed over the years, but to break it down for everybody, here's how it really works. If you cut out like web comics and anything that people read like on their phone, like webtoon,
Yeah.
if you cut out all that, the way
Yeah.
people are actually consuming, meaning they're reading comics and buying comics, if you lump them all together, it's the manga itself is and manga. If you combine it with young adult graphic novels like Dog Man and Captain Underpants, if you combine that all together, that's $1 billion, and people read it all through bookstores like Barnes and Noble, and they those publishers are the same, like two publishers. It's basically Penguin, which is also Random House, and then Simon and Schuster. And there's a few others, but like let's just to keep it simple, it's like that's it. It's like all the manga goes through Viz and like the same three publishers. They go through Barnes and Noble, and people buy them through Barnes and Noble, or they buy them through those big publishers that are either partnered with a distributor or are a distributor themselves. That's just like manga and uh, graphic novels alone. Another billion is goes through the comic book shops, so not bookstores. Those are two separate things actually in the way the kind of the supply chain works. So you have to separate
Let me
that out.
ask you a quick question. Quick question.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm sorry if I messed up your train of thought.
No, you're good.
Which one you think is better, the bookshops or the comic book shops?
So for those that are getting into comics, like better is a hard way to put it, but
Okay.
it's kind of like this. You reach a bigger market in bookstores because most people read trades. That and there's a second half to this that we'll get to after I get through all this that I want to explain to people, because like I want to get through like what are the basics of how it's like kind of supposed to work, or like the way we think of it, the
That's
skeleton
why
of
I'm
the
glad you're
structure,
here.
and then what does it actually look like from me as a creator on the other end, like who's actually making money
Yeah,
here.
that's
Okay.
that's exactly why you here, brother. Go ahead, take your time, break it down, brother.
So like the bookstores are literally physical thick books. Manga you can think of as like 100, 250, sometimes even, there's thick ones. Like I've got Vagabond back there. It's like 600 pages or something. Big books. That's how most people consume books, even comic books. They read comic books as trades and they buy them in bookstores. Let's just say Barnes and Noble to keep it simple. It's like there are others, but like that's it. Your Barnes and Nobles and then like your local bookstores, and they're buying them as books. That's $1 billion a year in revenue just in that alone. Books as graphic novels and trades in the bookstores include and the manga. Now in comic book shops, which is a separate supply chain, those are your comic shops, your card shops that sell comics, your Slackers games that sells comics and things like that. Um, they also go through the same methods of they go through a distributor. And now it's been mainly Diamond. That might be changing now that they've gone bankrupt, but it's basically like that distributor is how they bought books. It's through that catalog. And if it's not Diamond now, it's also Lunar or the Penguin that also sells books, that also distribute through comic shops. And that's how people in this case being in the comic book shops, buy Marvel comic books. So the actual floppies, if they want to put floppy Marvel comics in their shop, they buy them through the Penguin Random House distributor. They get them in that catalog, and it's not always a physical catalog. It's literally just them online. If they're wanting to get DC books, they get them through the Lunar catalog. So those comic shops are literally going on to the same way we go on Amazon and buy what we want to buy. They go on these distribution sites, and there's new ones for independent comics. There's distributors out there now that are outside of these main ones. But point being is they get on these catalogs, get on these sites, these basically wholesale websites and portals and things to buy the books, and then they put in an order, and they'll say, and they put in the order through the platform, and then that platform then basically, if someone puts in an order through that catalog, the distributor then buys the books from the publisher. Okay. So, but in reality, how this happens is no one's like buying, like at some point, somebody's got to print it. So they don't print books until they get an idea of how many people want. Now, the comic shops then base what do people want based upon people that literally come in their shop and say, I want this. So they have a pre-order catalog that they give to customers or to their regular customers. Most people get their comics in what they call a pull list. So they go to their comic shop and say, I want everything Valiant puts out, or I want every Superman or whatever they say. And then the comic shop just, as they get those, they put that in that customer's box. And that person picks them up, and then they pay them whenever they pick them up or whatever. But you also go in there and you change your order and you say, hey, you know what? There's this new thing that's coming out. It sounds cool. Can you give me issue 1? And if I like it, I'll subscribe to the rest of the series. And they literally like subscribe to a series the same way we would subscribe to a Netflix account or something like that. And people, the readers, are literally, that's how they view it. Is they're like, the publisher I'm on, Massive, is having a weird cyberpunk comic coming out. I don't know if I'm gonna like it, but let me pre-order like the first 3 issues or something like that. And then that comic shop will then put in they don't normally just put 1, they might put in a few if at least one person wants it. And then once there's like a window where that pre-order window happens, the amount of pre-orders you get, the publisher then, like the distributor, basically says, we want 600 copies of issue 1 of this thing. And then the publisher then basically 3X's that. And the reason they 3X that is for 2 reasons. Number 1 is because pre-orders, the comic shops themselves will usually order more than because, like I was saying, if they get at least 1 pre-order, that means they might get more down the line. They're like, oh, at least one person's interested in this kind of thing. I might have a few because the shops know their people. They're like a bar. They know who comes in and who's a regular, and they might know so and so gets everything that's got a sexy woman on the front or whatever, So they'll be like, Jim will probably get this. The other reason is because they're basically printing things at a third of what it costs to. Basically, they're selling them 3 times as much as what they're printing them at. So that's how they make money on the actual, like the margin, is because they're buying things and they're selling them at a higher cost than they're buying them by about 2.5 to 3 times that amount. So whenever a comic shop orders a certain amount, if they know 600 people ordered it, they know that they will make their money back on those 600. So then they basically say, if I know for sure, I will like basically get all my money in for printing 600. Well, if I print, 3 times that, all of that will be profit because I know 600 of them will make me break even. So now if I can continue to sell the rest of them that are just warehoused, they're literally just sitting on a shelf somewhere. It might not even be their comic shop. It might be literally in a warehouse at Diamond or Lunar, but they bought them, their warehouse, because they know that they already made their money back on the 600 that were pre-ordered. So point being is that's generally what happens from the store to who's actually buying the books. And so where does this actually matter and who's bigger? And like, okay, so a company like Image is in comics probably the most relevant and important publisher you can be on when it comes to like just the fact that you're published by Image. Does that mean I will get on the shelves and that people will buy it? Because just because the people that go to comic shops many of them will say, give me every new Image comic or every new Image book that's of a certain genre. And so because of that, almost any series they release, they can pretty much guarantee they're going to get about 5,000 minimum, just like their normal peoples that would just have anything on their pull list. You're going to get at least that amount. So that's why, as a creator, they are like the Netflix of comics, because just getting on there
Wow.
gives you
Okay.
A, credibility, and B, a good chance that you're at least on a printing standpoint going to break even and profit. Now, so the publishers like Image and now Boom and Dark Horse and IDW, like the other ones you're saying, like they have it to where they at least can, they get enough regular readers to cover just a bare minimum print run that makes sense to sell a book at the general market amount. So like right now that's $5. Okay. So for them to make sense on printing, let's just say that it costs them $1, just these are rough estimates. Don't quote me on this, but to make the math easy for people to understand, it's like the publisher is also responsible for printing. The distributor does not print books. The publisher, if they don't have their own partnership with a printer, like, basically they have to partner with a printer somehow, whether it's in the United States, whether it's local, whether they go through the same ones you and I do, like not Global Comics, Comics Wellspring or
Comics
Mixa.
Wellspring. Yeah.
Yeah, like however they're getting them printed, that's between the publisher and the printer. But then that's whenever you're from a publisher standpoint, you reach legitimacy when you can get your comics into the catalog of the distributors. So comic shops order through only a select full of distributors, like a certain amount of catalogs. They're not gonna, because those catalogs are on a set scale, meaning like every week, every Wednesday or whatever, they get a new shipment. If they get with a distributor that like can't keep up with the demand, is what they say the market, or like if they can't keep up with like the general machine that functions of when people get their new books dropped off, when the order happens, other distributors just get left to dry because people aren't using it.
Well, see,
So
that's funny you said that, because Larry Niobe Comics, when I hear him going back and forth with people, he'll say, well, I'm in previews. I'm doing something big. So being in previews, that's a real big deal for indie creators.
it's a big deal for any creator. And I'm going to jump into where Larry's right and then where Larry misses the mark, in the sense that like where he and I had arguments.
Okay, speak on it, brother. Speak on it.
So what he's right about is that is what we, to compare it to movies or something like that. Most people don't watch a movie unless it's on the things that they have subscriptions to. They have Disney Plus, they have Netflix. Some people don't even have any of that. They might have a bundle. But so what does that mean? That means that if you get your movie on some platform that no one has, okay, well, you made a movie that people can buy and it might be big on that platform. But almost the majority of people that are just out on the streets and people like your coworkers, they're not going to know what movie you watched on Popflix. And they're going to be like, yeah, it was this really funny indie comedy that I watched on Popflix. They're like, what the heck is Popflix? Like I watched Netflix and I watched Stranger Things. Okay, so what he's saying is I got my movie in previews, which is basically like saying my movie's on Netflix, not on Popflix. Like my movie's right next to Stranger Things. Now where he's wrong is just because you get in the catalog does not mean anybody knows who you are, or that anyone will buy it, or that it will even make it in the shops.
Right.
Because unlike Netflix, the distributor, like previews, they base their orders based upon actual people, or what people might not be the end reader. It might be just the comic shops, but you might get into the catalog. But that's the difference between Image Comics and Scout Comics. no shade to Scout. I was with Scout, like, but that's the difference is Scout has maybe 1,000 regular readers per month, and Image has 10 to 100,000. And that's just such a level of magnitude difference that it's like everybody might have heard of The Walking Dead that reads comics, but not everybody has heard of Stabbity Bunny, which is like the most the hit with Scout. But people know Walking Dead. Whether you're in comics or not, people watch it on TV or whatever. Like it's just a whole level of magnitude higher to where in the grand scheme, it's like that's what has relevance. What really matters is you want to get where the people are. And where the people are in comic books is they're in the comic shops and they're distributed through Diamond or Lunar or Penguin.
I heard you said something on Coffee Comics
Uh-huh.
that kind of aligns with what you're saying. You said the people with the most readers win. The people with the bigger audience win. And that makes so much sense here you talk because, you know, with your image, is that almost like a guarantee that your book will do good or your book will do decent?
It's a guarantee your book will do decent. That's all it is. So here I'll level things up in a different category. So if you think of as like the gatekeepers in comics essentially are publishers when it comes to how do people find me? How do I have credibility? So like with the Niobe thing, it's like you get credibility by getting on the shelves with other books that are well known. The other books that are well known are through a handful of publishers. So the real legitimacy is like, can you at least get on the shelves with the big publishers? And that's getting into any of the publishers that have Diamond Distribution, Lunar Distribution, or Penguin, or whatever, the main distributors. So then it's like the next level up is, can I get with the bigger publishers? And the relevancy and the importance of publishers is truly just their audience size. Because if you think about it from our perspective, I can on my own build an audience that could be huge. And it's been done over and over again where you see people that without any publishers, they built an audience of thousands and they make plenty. They do books on Kickstarter and they make $100,000 just kickstarting their books. Or a good example, not even at that extreme of a level, is Charlie Stickney, who is an editor on one of my first books, It Eats What Feeds It. He now has a series called White Ash that he completely kickstarts. He profits and he makes premium books, and every one he does, he gets 5-figure sales, and he has 1,000 to 2,000 plus readers every single issue he comes. And he gets all that money to himself. There's no cut that goes to the comic shops. There's no cut that goes to a publisher. He is the publisher and the creator. It's like it all goes to him. So he is a self-sustaining, perfect example of someone outside the system that has just a solid reader base of about 1,000 to 2,000 people that when you reach that number and you get 1,000 to 2,000 people that will read whatever you're doing every month, and you can publish it, and like you're just profiting every time because you're not giving anybody else any rights, any royalty cuts or anything like that. It's all goes to him. It's so in his sense, there's no reason for him to go to a publisher unless it's some publisher that's so big that they can grow his monthly readership by at least like 10x that, because he's already making a profitable amount on his own. It's actually very hard to make a profitable amount through the publishers, even the bigger publishers like Image, because like I said, if their value is like their regular reader base, meaning that who is buying everything Image does. So if a lot of people might buy Image comics, but they're not going to buy your Image comic for some reason. So that's where like you'll get the big difference between 10,000 readers on one series. I'm trying to think of a good example of like a lesser known Image comic series, but there's been plenty. I mean, Image puts out a lot of books. Like from an indie perspective, we think that they don't, because you're like limited to there's sub. Image also works a bit different to where it's actually multiple companies. Like Robert Kirkman has his own imprint of Image,
companies,
and then there's Skybound and like it's
Top
actually
Cow.
like it's kind of like 4 different companies underneath one label. But for simplicity's sake, like let's just say that there's certain people that just anything with that image eye, they tell their comic shop, I'm going to buy. And let's just say that's 10,000 people will just blanketly buy whatever. If it's a hit, that can grow up to like 100,000, and that's how you get hits like Walking Dead or Saga that are regularly selling 100,000 plus per issue. And it's the same publisher as some guy that's only selling 10. That's because their base is like 10,000 readers that will just buy whatever. And then it might go up to 20, 30, etc. if it's a bigger and bigger hit within that publisher. A smaller publisher that might also have distribution the same way Image does would be something like Scout Comics, who I was also with, who their base readers is actually more like less than 1,000. So for you to actually reach just the base of Image is you have to be a whole exponential higher of a hit just to hit even Image's base. So in that sense, Image is the better publisher because they have the audience that you need to just be decent.